He was the strongest man who ever lived, and it nearly destroyed him. Before he became a legend, Heracles committed an unforgivable act, in a madness he never chose. What came next wasn't a reward. It was a sentence, 12 tasks, each one designed to kill him. This is the story of how a broken man built a myth that outlived every empire that came after him. Heracles was never supposed to survive childhood. He was the son of Zeus and a mortal woman, Alcmene, and that alone was enough to earn the hatred of Zeus's wife, Hera. She sent 2 serpents into his crib before he could walk. He strangled them both with his bare hands. Hera waited. She was patient in the way only a god can be. Heracles grew into the greatest warrior in Greece, married to Megara, a princess of Thebes, with children he adored. And this is where Hera struck, not with a monster, with his own mind. She drove him into a psychotic rage, a madness so complete that when it lifted, he found he had killed Megara and their children with his own hands, believing them to be enemies. There is no version of this story where that horror is played for spectacle. It's the reason everything after it happens. Heracles didn't ask for forgiveness. He demanded a punishment severe enough to match what he'd done. He went to the oracle at Delphi. The oracle's answer became the spine of the entire myth. Serve King Eurystheus of Tiryns for 12 years and complete whatever labors he assigns. Eurystheus, terrified of Heracles and egged on by Hera, didn't pick easy tasks. He picked tasks built to be unsurvivable. The first task looked simple: kill a lion terrorizing the region of Nemea. It wasn't simple. This lion's hide couldn't be pierced by any weapon, bronze, iron, or stone. Heracles' arrows bounced off its skin like rain. So he did the only thing left. He cornered it in its own cave, dropped his weapons, and strangled it with his hands, the same hands that had killed the serpents in his crib. He skinned the lion using its own claws, the only thing sharp enough to cut its hide, and wore the pelt for the rest of his life. It's the image every statue of him repeats, the lion's skin over the shoulders. That's this moment. His first labor never actually ended. He carried it with him. A serpent with many heads, living in the swamps of Lerna, and here's the part every retelling gets right. Cut off one head, and 2 grow back in its place. Heracles brought his nephew Iolaus for this one, and that decision mattered later. Every time Heracles severed a head, Iolaus cauterized the wound with fire before it could regenerate. Head by head, they worked through the entire creature, ending with the one head that was immortal, which Heracles buried under a massive boulder. It worked, but when he reported back, Eurystheus refused to count it. Heracles had accepted help, and the terms were that he do this alone. The sentence had a loophole, and Eurystheus intended to use every one of them. Not a monster this time, a deer sacred to the goddess Artemis, with antlers of gold and hooves of bronze. The task wasn't strength, it was patience. Heracles chased this animal for an entire year across Greece before he finally caught it without harming it, because killing something sacred to Artemis would have made an enemy of another god entirely. When Artemis confronted him, he explained the sentence he was under, and she let him carry the hind to Eurystheus alive, on the condition he release it after. He did. A monstrous boar ravaging the region of Erymanthos. Heracles' method here was almost anticlimactic after the hind. He chased the boar into deep snow, where its own weight worked against it, and carried it back alive, trapped in a net. The stories say Eurystheus was so afraid of the boar that he hid in a bronze storage jar buried in the ground and begged Heracles to get rid of it. Eurystheus stopped trying to kill Heracles with monsters and switched to humiliation. King Augeas owned thousands of cattle, and their stables hadn't been cleaned in 30 years. Heracles was told to clean them in a single day. Instead of a shovel, he rerouted 2 entire rivers, the Alpheus and the Peneus, through the stables, letting the current do in hours what would have taken a lifetime by hand. Augeas refused to pay the reward he'd promised, which becomes its own story later. But the labor itself was done by nightfall. A flock of man-eating birds with bronze beaks and metal feathers they could launch like arrows, nesting in a marsh so thick Heracles couldn't wade in to fight them directly. The goddess Athena gave him a pair of bronze rattles, a gift from the smith god Hephaestus, to startle the birds into the air, where he shot them down as they scattered. a rampaging bull terrorizing the island of Crete, the same bull tied to the myth of the Minotaur. Heracles wrestled it into submission with his bare hands and carried it, alive, all the way back to Eurystheus. Eurystheus, once again too afraid to keep what Heracles brought him, released it, and the bull's story continues elsewhere in Greek myth, wandering toward Marathon. 4 horses belonging to King Diomedes of Thrace fed on human flesh. Heracles fed Diomedes to his own horses, which calmed them enough to be led away. A labor that turns the cruelty back on the person responsible for it, a pattern that shows up more than once in this myth. Eurystheus's daughter wanted the war belt of Hippolyta, queen of the Amazons. Heracles sailed to their land expecting a fight, but Hippolyta, impressed by him, offered to give him the belt freely. It should have ended peacefully. Hera intervened directly, disguising herself as an Amazon and spreading a rumor that Heracles meant to kidnap their queen. In the chaos that followed, Hippolyta was killed. Heracles left with the belt, but not the victory anyone wanted. A 3-bodied giant living on an island at the edge of the known world. To get there, Heracles needed a way across the ocean, so he borrowed the golden cup of the sun, god Helios, to sail across. He killed Geryon's 2-headed guard dog, his herdsman, and finally Geryon himself with a single arrow that struck all 3 of his bodies, then drove the cattle overland, alone, all the way back to Greece. Golden apples guarded by nymphs at the western edge of the world and by a 100-headed dragon. Heracles didn't fight for these. He found Atlas, the Titan condemned to hold up the sky, and offered to carry the sky himself, while Atlas, free of his burden for the first time in an age, went and retrieved the apples. Atlas came back, apples in hand, and suggested he'd deliver them himself, leaving Heracles holding the sky permanently. Heracles agreed, then asked Atlas to hold the sky again for just a moment so he could adjust his cloak for the weight. Atlas took the sky back. Heracles picked up the apples and left. The final labor. Not a monster to kill, a monster to bring back alive from the underworld itself. Heracles descended into the realm of Hades, and the god of the dead agreed to let him take Cerberus, the 3-headed hound guarding the gates, on one condition: no weapons. Heracles wrestled Cerberus into submission with his bare hands, the same way he'd taken the very first labor, the Nemean Lion, and carried the guardian of the underworld back to the surface. Eurystheus took one look at it and begged Heracles to return it immediately. 12 labors, 10 years turned into 12. Every task built to be unsurvivable, and he survived every one of them, some through strength, but just as often through patience, through borrowed help he wasn't supposed to need, and once through simply outsmarting a Titan. The oracle never promised Heracles forgiveness. It promised him a way to carry what he'd done instead of being destroyed by it. That's the part that gets lost when the labors get flattened into strongman fights monsters. Every labor is really the same story told 12 different ways. Something unbearable gets put in front of him, and he finds a way through it anyway. That's why this myth outlasted every empire that told it. If you followed the shorts version of any of these, the Hydra, Cerberus, the Nemean Lion, you've only seen a piece of this. This is the whole sentence, start to finish. Subscribe if you want the next full myth told the same way, and let me know in the comments which labor you'd want as its own deep dive.